Hi everyone, welcome to Miss Adams Teaches Macbeth. In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about the theme of ambition. I'm going to give you 6 key ideas that would be perfect for writing an essay in your exams. They'll cover language, structure, form, and of course, a little bit of context. So let's get started. Okay, so let's look first off at where the idea of ambition is sort of peaked for Macbeth, and that is of course when he hears the first prophecies, the first set of prophecies. So he's told by the witches that he's Thane of Glamis, which he already is, that he'll be Thane of Cawdor, and then he will become king. And this is his immediate reaction. So first of all, look at the imperative. Stay, you imperfect speakers. Tell me more. So we can see that, he's not dismissing it. He wants to know. This is interesting to him. So you've got 2 imperatives here, stay and tell me. And then we have some reasoning. By Sinel's death, I know I am Thane of Glamis. So yeah, I am Thane of Glamis. That's me already. But how of Cawdor? The Thane of Cawdor lives a prosperous gentleman. So he's saying, well, that can't be. I know the Thane of Cawdor. Dramatic irony here. We know, of course, that the Thane of Cawdor has betrayed the king. We learnt that in Act 1, Scene 2. And then the next thought, he says, and to be king stands not within the prospect of belief, no more than to be Cawdor. So at this moment, his mind is thinking, and he says it out loud, hang on a minute, that's not physically possible. That's not even something that could be thought of, because he recognizes his position and his place. We've got a context point here, which is the great chain of being. So back in those days, they had a very clear belief in the order of from God all the way down to like minerals and rocks and things, and everyone had a specific position. Imagine it like a little set of stairs going up, and everyone's got their position on it. And right at the very top you've got God, and then when you move down you have the monarch. So God goes first, and then the king or the queen is under him, so they are ruling the earth. And then under that you then have the rest of humankind, and they are positioned according to status. So obviously Macbeth is going to be higher up than the porter, clearly, because they've got different statuses. But you couldn't move up and down, because this is as God has decreed. So at the moment, his ambition you can kind of see here, but because his belief in the great chain of being, he doesn't think that it could possibly happen. So it sort of almost it's like, no, that's not even something that I would consider. But the hint, of course, is what he's about to find out, which is that he's going to be Thane of Cawdor. So this thing that he thinks is impossible, that starts to get a shadow of a doubt, and that's how the ambition starts to take control. The turning point is actually really early on. Quite a lot of the time people are like, oh, it's Lady Macbeth when she gets in his ear. But this is Act 1, Scene 4. And it's really interesting when you look at the kind of sequence of events. So in this moment, they meet Duncan, the king. And Duncan says to him and Banquo, I have begun to plant thee, and will labour to make thee full of growing. So this metaphor of kind of tending like a gardener to a plant. Duncan is saying, I will allow you to grow in status. So if there is a kind of sense of ambition here, Duncan is offering to kind of fulfill that need, but in a way that is rightful, in a way that is good. And this is one of the problems with Macbeth's action. It's not that he was being hard done by. His ambition didn't stem from the fact that no one would give him the opportunity. He had the opportunity here. He just chose not to take it. And the reason he chooses not to take it is because here Duncan says, we will establish our estate upon our eldest, Malcolm. And that's the reminder. Malcolm's the next king. And in his mind he's like, oh, not me, it's Malcolm. He is named to the Prince of Cumberland. But again, Duncan reminds him, signs of nobleness, like stars, shall shine on all deservers. So again, he's promising that he will be offered more, that because he's deserved, because of his fighting in the war, he will be able to be raised up. However, here we have Macbeth, an aside. So whenever it's an aside, this is a dramatic device, so very worth commenting on in your exams, because it means that it is his direct thoughts and no other characters can hear it. So it's just him and us. The Prince of Cumberland. Note that it's an exclamative, so you've got that immediate sense of frustration. That is a step on which I must fall down or else overleap, for in my way it lies. Now there is ambition, yeah, because he is basically saying, I have to jump over Malcolm. Malcolm is just a step. Notice how he's dehumanized with this metaphor, and also this pronoun here, it, rather than he. But he's talking about leaping over, and he says if he doesn't leap over him, he'll fail, he'll fall down. So this is a perfect quote to describe his growing ambition. So here he is in Act 1, Scene 4, having deep and dark thoughts that are treasonous, but are stoked and fueled by his ambition. Now that he's become Thane of Cawdor, he's now starting to think, well, maybe I can step up that chain of being. Maybe I can get further ahead. Enter Lady Macbeth. So this is all in Act 1, Scene 5. If you remember, Macbeth writes to Lady Macbeth and tells her all about what the witches have said to him. So it's a sign of their love and their trust and their equality here that he wants to confide in his wife. And she immediately starts thinking about his future. So she says, Glance thou art, and Cawdor, and shalt be what thou art promised. Note that modal verb. It's of certainty. So she's like, you are going to become king. Yet do I fear thy nature. It is too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. So that's interesting. This is the first time we have heard Macbeth being described as kind. This metaphor of the milk of human kindness, it's almost quite maternal. She's saying, this is going to happen for you, but I'm actually a little bit worried that you're too nice. You won't be able to carry out the acts that you need to. And then she clarifies that he's got ambition, but he doesn't have the illness that should attend it. So again, another metaphor there. She's saying you're ambitious, but you don't have that grit, that darkness in you. And she's like, so I'll help you out. Hie thee hither, that I may pour my spirits in thine ear. Lovely bit of intertextuality there. Shakespeare uses the image of poison being poured into ear, one to kill, but also as metaphor for like influence. Chastise with the valour of my tongue all that impedes thee from the golden round, the crown, which fate and metaphysical aid doth seem to have thee crowned withal. So she feels it's a certainty. Now you'll notice this is quite interesting in terms of context, the idea that the woman is saying, oh, well, is the man strong enough to be able to fulfill his ambitions? No, maybe not, so I'll have to help. Now that is quite interesting for the time period because, of course, women were expected to be, you know, inferior, submissive to the man, certainly not taking this kind of dark role. Some people talk about Lady Macbeth having ambitions for herself. I'm not sure that I agree, because in all of this, everything she does, it's always for Macbeth. At no point does Lady Macbeth say, oh, and I really want to be queen. I think she is ambitious for him, because everything she does is for him, even though it's dark, even though it's dreadful. So her ambition, if it's ambition, is tied up in the promotion of him. And she certainly recognised it as part of her husband's character. Once you've finished reading the play, you might come back to agree or disagree with her judgment that he's too full of the milk of human kindness, because I think that's the only time we see it. A very, very important point. If you get an essay on Hamartia in your exam, I want to see this word, Hamartia. Now, this is another one of Aristotle's tragic conventions for the tragic hero. So our noble man who starts the play full of virtue and goodness and then falls to his demise by the end. This normally is triggered by either a sense of fate or the character's hamartia, which means tragic flaw, i.e., every tragic hero should have a character trait that brings about their death and brings about their demise. Macbeth's hamartia is ambition. So you have to include this in your essays. And there's a kind of irony in the way that he considers the dangers of ambition. This is taken from Act 1, Scene 7, just at the very end of his soliloquy, where he's trying to decide whether or not he's going to kill Duncan. And once he's gone through all of the reasons not to kill him, he says, I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which overleaps itself and falls on the other. So we've got this lovely metaphor here of horse riding. So imagine being on a horse and when you want it to go further, and you give it a little with your foot. That's what he's talking about here, spurs on the side of the boots to prick the sides of my intent. That's the giddy up moment of the horse. So he's saying, I don't have that motivator to kill him, with one exception, and that is vaulting ambition. Okay, note this word here, vaulting, this idea of jumping. So it's all about promotion. But he recognizes its danger. He says, which overleaps itself and falls on the other. So he's actually saying here, the only thing that could make me do this is my ambition. And my ambition could lead me to trip up and fall. Now, if only he had listened to those words. He has identified here what his tragic flaw is, why it is so dangerous, and yet he still goes on to carry out those actions, which is why it is his tragic flaw. Okay, we obviously have to look at the impact of ambition as well. So I've split this into two. We've got a kind of global impact and then a personal impact, a kind of public versus private. So in the kind of global impact, there are signs that Macbeth's ambition, leading him to kill the king, to commit regicide, leads to total chaos and disorder on earth. There's a scene earlier on in Act 2, Scene 3, where one of the characters talks about how the earth was feverish and did shake in the night, this idea of like earthquakes and this metaphor of illness. And then later on in Act 3, Scene 2, Ross is having a chat with an old man who represents the everyman. So as in every person is afflicted by Duncan's death. Ross tells us that Duncan's horses, these beautiful, bounteous, swift, fast horses, turned wild in their nature, broke their stalls, flung out, contending against obedience, as they would war with mankind. So Duncan's horses, normally peaceful and obedient, have run wild, and then our old man, 'tis said they eat each other. Duncan's horses started eating each other. That's what happens when someone's ambition gets out of control. So Macbeth kills the king because of his ambition, and the world turns to pot. And this is because he has displaced the great chain of being. Okay, he has messed with the divine right of kings, i.e., that God chooses the king. And then on a private note, it also has had an impact on his mind. So again, in Act 3, Scene 2, sorry, I think that first one should say Act 3, Scene 1, sorry about that. Oh, full of scorpions is my mind, dear wife. Thou knowest that Banquo and his fiancée lives. So this is another part of the ambition spiralling and bringing about Macbeth's downfall, because he's not happy with being king. He doesn't feel safe. You know, now that he's there, he's got to keep it. So that's, I think this is such a wonderful metaphor. It's so horribly vivid. Full of scorpions is my mind. Note the hyperbaton, the inverted syntax, as in it's the wrong way round. It should be my mind is full of scorpions. But Shakespeare wants to put the place on full of scorpions is my mind, because he cannot stop thinking about all of the others. So his ambition triggers a need to kill more and more and more and more, obviously resulting in his downfall. And to conclude, the dangers of excessive ambition. That's the process. If you actually think what then happens to Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, if ambition is his hamartia, it is of course linked inextricably to why he dies. I put Lady Macbeth in here as well, just because I thought it's interesting to look at her end. Act 5, Scene 1, sleepwalking, a great sign of a disturbed nature to the Jacobean audience. But this is a moment where she's sleep talking and thinking back to moments where their ambitions were being realized. And she says in her dreams, "What need we fear who knows it, when none can call our power to account?" So this is a moment that she's thinking back to when they've already become king and queen. And she's saying, we don't need to fear anyone now because we're there. But of course, for Macbeth, it wasn't enough. What happens to Lady Macbeth for helping Macbeth fulfill his ambitions? Well, she's left in madness, she's isolated from Macbeth, and ultimately she kills herself. Note that Shakespeare almost demotes her status here by having her speak in prose as well, rather than in verse. Yeah, so she is sort of demoted, her status is lowered in this moment. And what happens to Macbeth? Well, Macduff cuts off his head. This is him talking to Malcolm right at the end. "Hail, King, for so thou art. Behold where stands the usurper's cursed head." Okay, so I wanted to put that in because this is the way that his ambition has led him to be viewed by his peers. He was once hailed brave and valiant and true by these men, and now he is the usurper who is cursed, and that is because of his excessive ambition. And of course, as soon as he and his ambition is gone, then order can be restored. The divine right of kings, the great chain of being, all goes back into place. Malcolm is made king, Duncan's rightful heir, back in the place where God had wanted him, and so order is restored. Okay, that was 6 points on ambition. A little bit of variety for you there. Some key quotes, some bits you might like to take out of those passages, but there is enough there to write a rock'em sock'em essay, so I hope that was helpful. Give me a shout if you've got any questions, pop anything in the comments, or if you've got any requests, and I will do my best to help you out. Otherwise, good luck with your revision. Thank you so much for watching. Happy revising.